Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring a dietary concept that honestly might give you a bit of the ick factor right off the bat. It's something that makes a lot of folks squirm just thinking about it. But stick with me, because I promise you, by the end of this, we are going to completely transform how you look at the future of food, sustainability, and who knows, maybe even your next meal. We are talking about the bug-eating paradigm shift. It's time to see if we can move our collective mindset from viewing insects as annoying household pests to recognizing them as an absolutely vital, nutrient-dense superfood. So let's just address the elephant in the room right out of the gate. Why don't we eat bugs? Why is it that most of us in the West literally recoil at the mere thought of insect legs, wings, and feelers winding up on our dinner plates? For a lot of us, the idea of cooking up a batch of insects is just fundamentally repulsive, right? We see them as pests that sting us, bite us, and raid our pantries. But the crazy truth is, this revulsion, it isn't actually an innate human trait at all. It's totally a learned cultural response. To really understand our hesitation, we first need to look at entomophagy. That's just the technical term for the practice of eating bugs. And we're talking about a massive variety of species here. Everything from beetles and caterpillars to locusts, grasshoppers, termites, and even dragonflies. Back in the day, early human hunter-gatherers probably watched animals foraging for protein-rich insects and just thought, hey, good idea, and followed suit. For our ancestors, bugs weren't just some desperate survival tactic. They were an everyday staple food and, in many cases, a highly sought-after, surprisingly gourmet delicacy. And here's where it gets really fascinating historically, because our modern rejection of bugs is essentially a historical accident. Back in the ancient era, the Greeks treated cicadas as these absolute luxury snacks. The Romans, they considered beetle larvae to be scrumptious. But then, a massive shift happened. Around 10,000 BC, the agricultural revolution kicks off in the Fertile Crescent. Our nomadic ancestors settled down, started farming crops, and domesticating animals. And overnight, their relationship with nature changed. Suddenly, insects weren't a food source anymore. They were crop-destroying pests. As populations grew and eventually urbanized into the modern Western world, we completely severed that connection with our foraging past. We just forgot our bug-eating history. But while the urbanized Wests completely forgot about it, 2 billion. Let that number sink in. That is the astonishing number of people around the world who currently consume bugs as a totally normal part of their everyday diets. And we're not talking about just eating 1 or 2 types of bugs either. They are actively turning almost 2,000 different insect species into food on a daily basis. No big deal. And you see this incredibly diverse, appetizing bug menu all over the globe, especially in the tropics. In those regions, insect species are large, they're diverse, and they tend to swarm, which makes them super easy to harvest. Take Cambodia, for instance, where locals gather huge tarantulas, fry them up, and sell them fresh right in the marketplace. Down in southern Africa, the juicy mapane worm is a staple. You'll often find it simmered in a rich, spicy sauce, or just eaten dried and salted as a snack. Over in Mexico, chopped jamilas are toasted to perfection with garlic, lemon, and salt. These aren't novelties. They are complex, deeply cultural regional dishes. Now here's where we really start talking about the future of global food systems. Because what if you just can't get past looking at a bug? Well, insects can be incredibly versatile. Beyond being eaten whole, they can be dried out and ground down into fine flours, versatile powders, and rich pastes. The best part? You literally don't even have to see a leg or an antenna. This is an absolutely brilliant, cost-effective solution for developing countries facing severe food insecurity. You can bake this bug flour into bread, mix it into stews, and seamlessly integrate it into a diet without ever triggering that visual ick factor. And when you compare the sheer nutritional power of bugs to traditional meats like beef, it is staggering. Bugs are a massive, totally untapped resource. Depending on a species, they can pack up to 80% protein. 80%! That's the body's most vital building block, right there. But it doesn't stop there. They're loaded with energy-rich fats. They've got high fiber, and here is the real kicker. Most edible insects contain the exact same amount or even more mineral iron than beef. When you realize that iron deficiency is literally the most common nutritional problem in the entire world, the potential of bug farming becomes impossible to ignore. Let's drill down into one specific, super accessible example, the Native American mealworm. It's this small yellow beetle larva that is incredibly easy to farm. Look at its nutritional breakdown. It is nearly 50% pure protein. That almost perfectly matches the protein you'd get from a serving of beef. And the rest of the profile? It's jam-packed with high vitamin content, loads of healthy minerals, and those energy-rich fats we talked about. It is basically a nutritional powerhouse wrapped up in a tiny, ultra-efficient package. So you're probably wondering, okay, how do I actually cook these things? Well, if you're brave enough to try them, preparation is amazingly simple and honestly, genuinely mouthwatering. You can just toss some mealworms into a pan and sauté them in a little butter and salt for a savory dish. Or if you've got a sweet tooth, roast them in the oven until they're nice and crisp and then drizzle them with chocolate for a crunchy snack. It really proves the point. Whatever you have to overcome with your mental ick factor, you absolutely gain back in incredible nutrition and surprisingly great taste. And hey, if you're still skeptical about the taste, just listen to the folks who actually eat them regularly. Bugs can be incredibly scrumptious. People say mealworms have this rich, earthy flavor that tastes a lot like roasted nuts. Crickets, when you cook them, actually give off this warm aroma that smells exactly like fresh popcorn. No joke. And locusts, diners say they taste strikingly similar to shrimp, which actually makes a lot of sense considering they share a ton of biological similarities. Now, let's pivot to the planet for a second, because the environmental side of this is a massive win. When you farm bugs, they emit a tiny, tiny fraction of the greenhouse gases that cattle or pigs do. They require drastically less physical space, and their water and feed requirements practically microscopic compared to what traditional livestock demand. In a world where our natural resources are becoming increasingly strained, this kind of efficiency isn't just nice to have, it's practically revolutionary. Plus, they act as nature's ultimate little recycling machines. Insects don't need prime agricultural feed to thrive. You can rear them entirely on organic waste. We're talking vegetable peelings, apple cores, and agricultural byproducts, stuff that would normally just get tossed out to sit and rot in our landfills, turning out methane. Instead, insects gobble up this waste and literally upcycle it back into high-quality, sustainable protein that humans and livestock can eat. It's a closed-loop dream. And the ripple effects go way beyond just biology and the environment. Socioeconomically, insect farming is a total game changer. These farms can be run effectively on a really small scale, making them highly accessible for everyday people. Despite taking up so little space, they produce incredibly high yields, and they're amazingly cheap to maintain compared to, say, managing a herd of cattle. Ultimately, this creates a profound opportunity to build sustainable local economies and uplift communities in developing countries, giving them real control over their own food security and income. Look, I know that even with all the logic, all the environmental data, and all the nutritional facts, picturing those little legs getting stuck in your teeth it's a hurdle. But I want you to think about the lobster for a second. Biologically speaking, a lobster is essentially just a giant sea bug with legs, claws, and feelers galore. And if we look at history, lobster was once universally regarded as an inferior, completely repulsive food, literally fit only for prisoners. But today, it's an expensive, highly celebrated delicacy. Then you look at edible bugs. Sure, they have the legs and feelers, and yeah, they are currently regarded as repulsive in the West, but they are packed with incredible nutrition. The parallel is totally undeniable. Which brings us to the ultimate question to wrap up this explainer. Can that exact same paradigm shift happen for bugs? If we completely flipped our collective script on the lobster, turning it from literal ocean trash into a gourmet treasure, there is absolutely no reason we can't do the exact same thing with insects. The only question left is, are you ready to get over the history, savor the crunch, and embrace the bug? Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and I'll catch you on the next one.